No one could have predicted this confluence of events just a few months ago, beginning with COVID-19, the ensuing economic crisis, and then the death of George Floyd at the hands of police, and now the seismic street protests for social justice, driving a sea change in public consciousness. For over 100 years, the Conference Board has helped the world's leading companies and society at large navigate crises and develop recent solutions for our country. Founded amid the labor unrest in 1916, the Conference Board has led the adoption of workplace safety reforms, compulsory health insurance, the 8-hour workday, just to name a few critical areas. Our Policy Center, the Committee for Economic Development, which I lead, helped shape the Marshall Plan that rebuilt Europe after World War II, as well as the Jobs Act of 1946, and continues today to shape public policy that impacts our workplaces, communities, and government. Given recent events, the Conference Board is launching this series of CEO forums to foster action called Building a More Civil and Just Society. And today we have the privilege of talking to Russlynn Ali, co-founder and CEO of the XQ Institute. Russlynn Ali has been a leading advocate for education equity for more than 2 decades. As Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights in the Department of Education during President Obama's first term, Ali spearheaded the federal government's renewed engagement with equity issues in schools across the nation. The XQ Institute is committed to transforming public high schools to close achievement and opportunity gaps and to make schools the center of community revitalization. And that is what we're here to talk about today. And Russlynn, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Dr. Murray. It's my pleasure to be here.
So I'd like to start by asking you to step back and give us your broader assessment as to how you would characterize the social state of our nation today. The issues of racism and inequity, as you know, are not new, nor is civil unrest that cries them. Is this a time for lasting change, positive change in America? Do you think that's possible?
It must be. Now, I doubt there is an organizational leader in the country who is not worried about and thinking about what this moment means for her organization. First, the pandemic that itself brings about a stark reminder of the deep inequities in America. And then the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Rashad Brooks, Mr. Blake, it goes on and on. These things are a stark reminder that all lives don't have equal value in America. And this moment marks a critical juncture, I believe, the story will tell us in the narrative of civil rights change in our country. It must. We are seeing now there are big signs of hope despite these twin challenges that bring about a compounded sense of grief. There are stunning reminders of hope and progress that we see the mantle of this civil rights movement carried by people of all ages, of all races, gives me hope that we see, we can't hide from it, right? We see things that some of us have realized for a very long time, the dormant isms, the deep injustices that some of us get to shield ourselves from. There are those of us that by study, by station in life, by experience, by family, by status, have been facing and dealing with these inequities in an ongoing fashion. We are at a moment in time where those of us that have been shielded from it can no longer hide. It is a calling to our innermost and deepest sense of morality and I find so much hope and so much idealism in the possibility of change, the possibility that we are truly dismantling and shedding the racist baggage of our country, that we are truly recognizing the deep and pervasive and persistent vestiges of slavery and of the racist policies and practices that communities everywhere have instituted to keep an inequitable system going. We have a generation today that has said enough is enough. They're not only responding on a deeply emotional level, recognizing the pain and injustices that too many of us have to face. They're responding on a deeply intellectual level. They understand that these isms are not in any of our enlightened self-interest, that the longer that we work to perpetuate them, the closer they get to every one of us, right? So yes, I do think now is a moment of change. I have to believe that in order to give me hope, but I can bear witness to it when I see teachers all across the country working to resolve the inequities that they face every day, knowing that a higher knowledge and a deeper understanding of the skills that all young people will need to know and be able to do to succeed in this new world, that it is their job, and that is the civil rights movement of today, to make sure that the kids that they serve get the benefit and the currency of rigorous teaching and deep knowledge in order to have a better life, despite a pandemic, despite conflicting policy, despite not knowing whether they're going to be in a building or at home from one day to the next. That gives me hope that this moment truly is a movement.
It's so encouraging to hear your optimism and your hope, and that's so critical in terms of leadership, and clearly has been a component of your leadership, and so important to move our country in the right direction. You've been playing a prominent role at the XQ Institute, and throughout your career, you've been working to create rigorous and equitable schools. You've called education America's civil rights issue, central civil rights issue today. What are the critical things you think need to happen to establish a truly just society, and the importance of what needs to happen to education to make that happen?
Well, it's a really interesting question, Dr. Murray, and one that I have thought deeply about, especially over the last 3 or 4 months, because it is quite clear that this pandemic is bringing about a massive disruption in the way we do school in America. It is also quite clear that we have needed transformation for a really long time. So if there is any opportunity in this crisis, it is to finally put the adult finger pointing, the adult fights aside, and rebuild our schools in a way that truly serves our nation's young people. As you mentioned, I really do believe that the system of schooling in America, the system of public schooling in America, and ensuring that it works as intended, as Thomas Jefferson said, as the great equalizer, is the most important civil rights issue of our generation. Now, how do I say that? In light of these protests, when we are seeing Black people getting killed, when we are bearing witness to the health and economic disparity that gives rise to perpetual inequities and injustice? I say that because not only in my own life as a first-generation American, as a child of a single parent, as someone who bore witness to the promise of upward mobility in this country, from poor to middle class, knowing full well that in my parents' home country, I likely never would have had the opportunities for that upward mobility, and knowing full well that it is the knowledge and the acquisition of education that empowered it, seeing every day in the kids that we serve at XQ, hearing from my sister that's been in a Title I school for now 15 years and seeing those young people that came before her, that came before us, and all of the data and all of the stereotypes and all of the predictability of what should have happened, where poverty is perpetuated and the cycle of inequity and injustice just continues, and that bears witness to poverty continuing. I have seen education flip that cycle in its tracks. I have seen and bore witness in my own life, and that of my niece and my loved ones bears that out, that education absolutely can and will change your life's trajectory. And it is the only thing I can guarantee will. So to watch, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, please.
I was going to say that one of your guiding principles here is that high school is not too late for struggling students to fulfill their promise as learners. And that is so fundamentally important to actually getting the changes you need, believing and actually fact-based principle that high school is not too late. What are some of the critical skills, and you were talking about how education really does change. What are some of the critical skills that need to be developed on the high school level in order to bring that success to students, particularly students who have been in inequitable situations?
Well, listen, for sure, high school is not too late. Not only do we have now decades of research that shows that high school really is the future of work, right? That is where you learn the skills, both soft skills and hard skills, social, emotional, and academic, that prepare you for the demands of life after high school and really lay the foundation for the rest of your life. But now we have irrefutable neuroscience that says to us that the plasticity of the adolescent brain actually resembles that of a 0 to 5-year-old. And we all know how influential learning is for our preschool young people. We have neuroscience data that shows that you can actually change your IQ at the high school level. So high school is not only not too late, it is our last chance to do what hadn't been done in the early part of a young person's schooling career. High school is also the fulcrum. It changes everything below it, that is not only pre-K, but all the way up to and through middle school, and changes everything above it. That is the workforce preparation as well as higher education to prepare for even further learning for lifelong learners. What high schools have been charged with doing, though, for too long, is compensating for what elementary and middle schools had failed to do. The good news is we've made great progress in our country, especially in the early learning, a real testament to the fact that when we commit to something as a nation, we actually do it and deliver on important promises. What we know for sure from both the brain science research, from studying high performing and low performing schools all across the country, and most importantly, from deep and rigorous survey data and talking to young people, is that the self-directed learner, that is the adolescent learner, the way they will engage in fun, dynamic learning is actually very different than a younger learner. That notion of self-directed is hugely important. Project-based learning, interdisciplinary learning, experiential learning. We know that works. We have seen capstone projects in schools across the country, XQ and others, where the most rigorous scientific end of senior year projects require deep statistical analysis, multidisciplinary scientific thinking from biology through chemistry and beyond, deep modeling and mathematical function to do it, deep technology know-how, not just in using available technology, but in actually making new technologies in order to do your research, in order to collect your data, and a deep understanding of history on how that work came to be, as well as big problem-solving skills to prepare for a better world with whatever that project was envisioning. We have seen young people going into ninth grade, starting those projects in very rigorous but age-appropriate ways, and ending them at their senior year, not just ready for college, but actually having mastered the laboratory skills that a freshman at an Ivy League university would do. All because the habit of mind and the curiosity of answering their big questions took them on a rigorous learning journey that was multi-year, multidiscipline, with a number of different teachers and experts in their field. Now, to do that, Dr. Murray, as you well know, requires not just changing the way we prepare young people for that kind of rigorous learning and the foundational supports they need, like curricula and the tools, but also a sea change in the way we deliver instruction. Nothing has brought, I think history will tell us, nothing has brought about that sea change more than the COVID crisis and this pandemic.
Really?
Because no matter what, the best teachers, no matter their subject matter expertise, are those that develop sustainable relationships with young people. The way we have to change the way we do school in order to maintain and create and develop those relationships with young people through this computer, through this screen, requires a dramatic intervention, right? But there's not a teacher I've talked to, and I have talked to dozens, if not hundreds, since the pandemic began, that haven't said some version of, this is what I'm figuring out. How do Laura and Russlynn build a relationship so that we can learn together, especially at the adolescent level, over this screen? Now, the great news is we're figuring it out, right? We are figuring it out, and we are developing new platforms, new scheduling technologies. Some of the XQ schools have been doing this for a long time, and they are well poised to be able to share those lessons. I will remember, never forget, Purdue Polytechnic. Now, that school is phenomenal for any number of reasons, not the least of which is you graduate from that school and you will be enrolled in Purdue Polytechnic University and set up for a lifetime of success. But I was talking to a student, and we were talking about the agency over her own learning, and she was speaking about it with such like real agency, like, I control this. I know what I need to know and be able to do, and I'm going to do it. So I was like, tell me how does that work on any given day? So you get your playlist, You know what your assignment is. You're working it, but how does it really work? You're struggling with something. What do you do? She's like, I go on my app. What do you mean? I go on my app, my school's app, and I look to see which one of my teachers and the teacher I need to talk to and what their office hours are and what they have time and when I need. And I just go ahead and schedule it. You know, the beauty school app. No, I don't know that. Turns out it really was a beauty school app that these teachers and students white labeled and reconfigured to make it in the same way you can look to see when you need your hair done and when that person's available, and you can go in and schedule time. They did this for students to be able to access their teacher's office hours, but when the students needed it, when they were stuck on a problem. That was a few years ago. Now, those kinds of ideas are getting ubiquitous because we have to, in order to be able to interface in a classroom. When I have 30 students and my classroom looks like this, I have the benefit of being with my family this week on the East Coast. You know, COVID, you got to go see your mom no matter what, right? So no matter what, I made sure a long camper ride later, I could be here. My sister, as I mentioned, is a teacher in the PG County public school system where we live and where I grew up, where they live and where we've been for a long time. And to see them trying to manage this first week of school back, just today's the first day young people are back. Just this morning, it's gonna be hard. We have got to, right now, support our teachers in ways that we never have. If we didn't realize that our teachers were nation builders before this week, no doubt we will sooner than later. So I do hope another opportunity in this crisis is for the nation to recognize the value of its teachers, to pay them accordingly, to hold them accountable for utmost professionalism and rigor, and to do it together as communities everywhere work to ensure that we don't continue to lose precious time when it comes to our kids' schooling careers.
So you were, and the XQ Institute under your leadership is really a change agent, a disruptor of the system, the high school approach that we've had for years. And you're trying to help communities rethink their high schools by supporting these locally driven redesigns. What type of barriers have you come up against? How did you break through them? And what do you think are the most important components for successful redesigns of local high schools?
Well, I think let me start with the latter first. Community agency and ownership over the idea. The XQ, what one self-organized team called it, a designer of learner process. They said this is a 7-month designer of learner process. What that process does is works to empower community and a diverse set of community members to envision what high school as the hub of your community can do, and to flip conventional school design on its head, to start with what young people need in your community and to build rigorous learning experiences around it. Yes, we deal with the complexities of public school bureaucracy and budgeting and policy and infrastructure, of course, but that comes after the mission, design, school culture is built around the needs of young people. That means there is no one size fits all model to these schools. I could talk to you for hours about Grand Rapids Museum School, talk about night at a museum and school at a museum, where they use 250,000 historical and cultural artifacts as the basis of curriculum. where they are working not only to solve the mussel crisis that was the dissemination, that caused the dissemination of a local economy there, but also what will be the largest river restoration project is in the country, led by young people, or a comprehensive high school FIR in Houston, Texas, that seeks to become the greenest school community in the nation. Each of these schools, or Washington Leadership Academy, itself a charter school, but where young people are not just consumers of technology, they are makers of it. So I could go on and on about these places. What they are showing us in public school settings is what is possible when you put young people first, when you accelerate their learning, when, yes, you might have to compensate for voids in their academic career, but when you disrupt time. Schooling in these places is not 6 hours a day, 180 days a year, especially when you have to catch up if kids are coming into you behind. Time is the variable. Standards, though, are not. All kids in these schools are going to graduate college and career ready, full stop, full stop. And whatever it takes to get them there, these educators and leaders will do. We are definitely seeing this rise of project-based learning, competency-based learning, mastery learning, right? Done in a very, very rigorous way. But the biggest change that I think we are seeing bringing about, especially in the time of COVID, is truly disrupting how we think about time in schools. This notion of the Carnegie unit, this 180 day calendar, these units divided into 90-minute blocks that have now cut down to 40-minute blocks, and don't talk about transferring from one end of the building to the other because that takes away another 8 minutes, right? This idea that if you sit in a classroom and you get 45 minutes of learning at best over what effectively is a 6-month period of time, you're going to master a subject matter. That is what we are seeing being disrupted right now. And I do believe we will see schooling done very differently in the country as a result. The real question when it comes to high school transformation is not how to do it. It's definitely not how to do it. We have enough evidence from the best places on what's necessary, not just when it comes to teaching and learning in the classroom, but policies that give rise to supportive and transformative learning environments. So it's not how to do it. It's whether we have the civic and political will to get it done.
And that leads me to what has to be my key question here coming from the conference board. How can the private sector help in terms of leveraging these efforts? Clearly, companies are intricately involved in the local and regional levels, both as an employee base and as employers. And they've also been filling some of the voids that have been created in terms of the impact that the closure of the schools has had on COVID-19.
Sure.
This larger, much more innovative effort that you're leading, how can the private sector help?
In many different ways. So there is a huge role for the private sector actually in schools, actually in the business of schooling and teaching and learning. One of the XQ schools, Sci High in Seminole, Florida, it has businesses actually in the building with subdivisions set up and young people engaged in solving for serious and big problems that the company itself is wrestling with. And there are some smaller, more mom and pop local businesses, and there are Siemens and everywhere in between. Another school in Endicott, New York. What you were seeing, that was the birthplace of IBM. And you see apprenticeship and businesses getting, in return for space to actually operate their business, participating in internship programs and the education of young people. So that, no doubt, is hugely important. Local businesses especially, even if they are inter and intranational businesses, but they're nested in local communities, actually seeing themselves as porous partners with the school, right? And they can do that not just in offering external apprenticeships and internships and pathways and pipelines for young people, but actually participating in how the school is run and in teaching and learning. There is also the voice of business when it comes to policy. None have been more effective than the Chamber of Commerce in setting the expectations of the nation's public schools when it comes to standards development, what young people need to know and be able to do, both at the K-12 level and the higher ed level. Don't underestimate the power of that collective voice to influence policy and to create the ecosystem for change. And you have a hugely important vested interest in doing so. You ought not do the remediation for young people and new employees that schools should have done before you, right? In addition, I think we are seeing remarkable platforms developed by businesses as they're working on the skill enhancement of their employees for their own pathways, micro-credentialing and badging to show the skill sets that are necessary as lifelong learners progress through the employment in any respective industry are hugely important. We are taking lessons from many businesses that have done this in extraordinary ways. As we think about trying to find new ways for young people to just demonstrate different competencies outside of the academic schooling experiences. So for sure, setting the standards for what employees need to know and be able to do as they come into your doors, making those standards quite clear and known in the policymaking and academic settings, and using the voice for change, not just in the voting booth, but in the collective lobbying of any particular industry when it comes to the care and feeding academically of your future and current employees.
Russlynn, your impassioned and informed leadership is inspiring me as president of the Committee for Economic Development, which are leading business trustees who are interested in really changing, informing public policy on a whole host of these issues, including education. I can't help because you've given us a little bit of a window into your life and who you are. Just to ask you, what were some of the most important and defining moments in your own life that helped set you on a course to actually be the change agent that you are now in the education field?
I think that probably, oh gosh, Dr. Murray, I don't know if there's one. For me, like I've mentioned, I saw my mother get her bachelor's degree, her master's degree, her PhD when I was in high school. Homework at the dinner table was part of our daily routine and our home culture. I was also born the year that Title IX was enacted. And to grow up at a time when women empowerment mattered, when women equality in our schools mattered, not just in sports, but in the classroom. To grow up at a time when we were far more welcoming to immigrants than we are now. To grow up at a time where my Blackness did not make me afraid every day, has made me as an adult understand how fragile these privileges are. And perhaps it was one of my mentors, Marian Wright Edelman, that said it best when she said, service is the rent you pay for being on this earth. So I don't know if there is any one thing, but for sure, I know that I have to have a life of service or I'm not doing my fair share.
Well, we're fortunate to have you in the leadership, and I say we're fortunate, and I mean the nation is fortunate to have you in the leadership position you're in on such a critical issue. And it has been a real privilege today to talk to you about this on the public policy level, but in full disclosure to our viewers, I have to acknowledge that I actually know the impact of your work on the ground floor level with a daughter who is an instructor at one of the XQ Foundation Institute schools. And it's a privilege to be able to actually talk to you in terms of the broader public policy, but also to experience firsthand the incredible work you're doing.
Well, Dr. Murray, there was a reason I didn't talk about a school with an idea on a barge and what it could be like to envision young people dealing with coastal restoration and a sinking community. So New Harmony, well, can I just say one of my favorites, assuming they all are, but Sunny and the team there are remarkable, and your daughter is a real gift to the nation. So apples don't fall far from the tree, obviously. Thank you so much for your good work.
Well, thank you. This has been an incredible privilege today to actually speak with you and to have you join our series. So very, very much
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. And best wishes
Thank
for all
you.
you're doing. And
Take good care.
Okay, take care.